When I started my newsletter, I was the only person doing what I was doing.
Why did you have the confidence to be able to go against the grain and to be so honest in such a small Bob, in an industry that is so small, how have you made it as far as you've made it being so brutally honest?
Because I used to say I'm the only one. I was listening to Howard Stern earlier in the week, and he was complaining that he put all these years into radio. He got a commercial license, and now anybody can be a radio broadcaster. He was saying he got Kamala Harris for an interview, but so did the woman from
Alex
Call Her
Cooper.
Daddy. Okay. So, yeah, when I started my newsletter, I was the only person doing what I was doing. And it came out every 2 weeks. And it was, if you read me on a regular basis, now I'm covering a million topics and they're all non-analysis. But at that time, it was all business analysis. The interesting thing is I started the newsletter to get another job in the music business. Only the most successful people subscribed, the heads of all the labels, because they could hear a contrary opinion. Whereas the people further down the roster at the label, they had, drunk the Kool-Aid. To this day, I was talking to a guy who ran one of the major label groups, and he was talking to a new head of promotion at a label. And the guy was saying, "Oh, radio and this and that." Now, you're in Nashville. Country radio is a little bit different. Let's just talk regular pop, top 40 radio. Radio is everything. It's not. People get invested in their jobs such that they can't see another perspective. That's one of the reasons Irving Azoff is so successful. He has a sense of humor about himself. He can acknowledge some of the negative stuff. Doesn't mean that he doesn't fight back. And in addition, he's brilliant and a seer. But he's like a regular person. I'll talk to these very successful promoters and they'll talk about a tour they're behind. They want to convince you that the act is changing the world. Listen, you made a lot of money. A lot of people went. That's great. But it's not really impacting the culture at large. Can we talk about something else? Having said that, if you're, live drives the culture at this point. If you're backstage, no one wants to talk music anymore. They want to talk streaming television or politics. And that's a reference to what I was saying earlier. Music is not in a good spot. We argued in excess for a decade about distribution in the music business. It has been figured out. There is nothing beyond Spotify because Spotify is on demand. They deliver it when you want it. There is nothing beyond that. Okay. As the years go by, fewer people are complaining because they're not caught up in the game of yore when it was very difficult to get a deal. But if you got a deal, the record label kept you alive. I want to go one step further. I know the musicians from this era. I won't say all of them, but a very healthy percentage of them, far in excess of 50%, who you know the names of, never got a single royalty check. Limp Bizkit just sued Universal. They didn't get paid. And everybody's saying, "Oh, Spotify doesn't pay that well." Well, in the old days, you wouldn't have had a deal at all. Now you can make the record on your laptop. You can distribute it at a de minimis price, CD Baby, a million. It's on all the streaming services. You say, "Why aren't I rich?" Well, in the old days, you wouldn't even be able to play. And even if you did play, you'd be broke. This woman, Libby Titus, in her last chapter, was married to Donald Fagen. She wrote a standard, "Love Has No Pride." She was selling, fur at Bendel's in New York. You know, the reverse side of this, if you write an iconic track that is licensed, you can live off that one song. Let's be clear, the money has always been in the song. So you're catching me on a day when I'm a little below the weather or whatever, and I can't remember exactly how I was circling back to all that.
Here
So I'll
was
let you bring me
here
back.
here was the question. The question is now you're Bob Lefsetz, but when you were starting out, why did you have the confidence to be able to go against the grain and to be so honest in such a small industry?
That's who I am. That's who my father is. One of the weird things about growing older, the older you get, you ultimately realize how similar you are to your parents. My father made a good live. Okay. Normally, a real estate appraiser is a schlepper. For those who don't know Yiddish, that's a guy in a bad sport coat, shows up, really, forget about him. My father came from nothing. He was an engineer. He lost his job and he said, fuck, I'm never going to do this again. So he owned a liquor store. Then he turned that into another liquor store. Believe me, this is not a chain. I went back for the unveiling of my mother's headstone a year ago in Connecticut. I took my girlfriend by the liquor store. She couldn't believe they don't even make stores that small anymore, literally. But in the late 60s, a friend he grew up with, this is in Bridgeport, Connecticut, said, hey, they're going to do all this redevelopment here. And if no one knows more about the local real estate, my father was in commercial real estate on a very low level because he didn't have any money, but he knew the landscape. Said, if you become an appraiser, I will hire you on all my cases. It's a little off point, but maybe it isn't. So the way it works is there's condemnation. A state wants to build a highway. They say, we're going to build a highway through your house. So they have their own appraisal. Say, well, your house is worth $100,000. Well, maybe you think that's what it is, and you take the 100K. Or else you say, I think I'm getting ripped off. And they go to their lawyer. The lawyer would call my father, said, Morris, go take a look. My father might go out there and say, 100K is a good, this happened, 100K is a good price. But he might say, hey, they're ripping you off. Ultimately, there would be a hearing, which other people would be trials. And I went with him a few times. He was brutally honest. In addition, if you're in the metropolis, every lawyer, every doctor is a specialist. But they're general practitioners when you live in the suburbs, at least when I was growing up. My father did this every day. So, the lawyer, they would do multiple things. So my father would literally write a script, and people can't understand in the cell phone day. Every night the phone used to ring, and my father used to yell at these people, shut up, just do what I'm telling. And he made so much money for people. He could only get a flat fee. Under the law, you can't get a percentage, that they continued to hire him. In addition, my mother was a very social person. As they said about Reggie Jackson, she was a straw that stirred the drink. So there'd be a lot of events at my house. And my father you cook on the barbecue, he would make the drinks, and these people would be bullshitting, even my mother. And at some point he would flip out and say, that's completely untrue. So all these years later, I see that as my identity. I'll go one step further because I've thought a lot about this. I went to college. There was not a single objective test. Every test was an essay test. First semester, first year, I took an anthropology course. The teacher said, we're never going to discuss the reading in class. If you can't read, you shouldn't be here to begin with. So I went to college. They taught us the power of analysis. People are not going to like this, but the music business is a dumb business. It used to run really on intimidation, with guns and attitude and bullying. That's still there, but a lot has been squeezed out. Live Nation is a public company. The three major labels are public companies or part of a public company. So I knew how to see the issues. The average person couldn't. So if you go back to your initial question about school, music business school, they can teach you about royalties. They can teach you the mechanics. Everybody, to a person who's been successful in the music business, is an entrepreneur who would be successful at whatever they did. Look at David Geffen. He started out in the movies and then switched to music with Laura Nyro, and the rest is history. Then he had Broadway, did all these other things. Irving Azoff, all these people. Chris Blackwell. These people, you can't educate people like this. They have the identity or they don't. And what you have to realize, there's a great line from Bob Dylan on the album John Wesley Harding, where called Dear Landlord. He goes, each of us has his own special gift, and you know that was meant to be true. And if you don't underestimate me, I won't underestimate you. You know, this is going to sound like boasting, but I could know more of the powerful players in the music business than literally anybody else. Okay. And this is a business built on relationships. I never, ever worked those relationships.